World needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone. Lord, we don't need another mountain. There are mountains and hillsides enough to climb. There are oceans and rivers enough to cross, enough to last till the end of time. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone. Lord, we don't need another meadow. There are cornfields and wheat fields enough to grow. There are sunbeams and moonbeams enough to shine, enough to last till the end of time. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone. Oh, no, not just for some, but just for everyone.
Church and the Spiritual Center used to be the place where the community could go for wraparound services. And so our training on this week was sort of a reminding of who we are as faith centers, and that our reach is great when it comes to spiritual stuff, but we need to do more as far as helping people in the city so we can really live out the truths that we teach on Sunday morning. And so with that, this workshop was put together We have three very powerful speakers. Two you know, one we are getting to know. We have our very own Susan Scott, who is if I can say this, a clinician and registered nurse at Children's Hospital, and she's going to be presenting. And then we have our very own and our newest addition to the prayer chaplaincy staff, Rachel Waters, and then her dear family, who's also going to be presenting. And then we have Miss Elizabeth Presley, who we will get to know, but she is a certified recovery support specialist with the Crisis Center in Birmingham. And the presentations will go in that order. First, Ms. Susan, then Rachel, and then closing us out is Miss Elizabeth. So without further ado, put your hands together for Susan.
Thank you for being here today for our presentation. Like Jesse said, I'm Susan, and I have worked as a psychiatric nurse in psychiatry for 23 years, and I also have a master's in counseling. The information I'm going to be sharing with you today is from an article by Dylan Kirsch, and he reports on the research on early life stress and substance use disorders, the critical role of adolescent substance use. So that's a mouthful. And what it's actually saying is, what is the association between early childhood maltreatment and the common language that we use? We're talking about child abuse, okay? And how that predisposes a person to, first of all, adolescent substance abuse, and then going on to the substance use disorders. And it's not saying that those with substance use disorders have all suffered abuse as a child, but it is saying that child abuse does contribute to developing adolescent and later on substance use disorders. Like I said, I am a clinician, and there were some startling to me information in here that I had never really studied in depth, so I appreciate that. This article is by Dylan Kirsch, so again, I'm sharing the information that I read that he reported. And he talks about early life stress. Again, that's going to be referring to child abuse. And he says, well, the research shows that early life stress is a risk factor for substance use disorders. And there's 4 categories that we look at as child abuse, and that is sexual, physical, emotional abuse, and physical and emotional neglect. It said that 53% of adults have a history of child abuse prior to 18 years of age. That's almost half of the population. The population that he studied, the amount was 17,337 people. Of this amount, 65% are at increased risk for alcoholism, 50% for drug abuse, 78% for IV drug use. I will say, working with the psychiatric population, and I do work with kids and adolescents, when I interview a patient and their family, I rarely hear a history of IV drug use, but again, it may not be reported. They may choose not to share that. If a person has a history of experiencing 4 of these categories, there is a 7.2 increase of risk for alcohol use disorder. Where this got really complicated for me is, again, I don't know, I think that just as people, we look for the simplest explanation of why people have difficulties, and it's not simple. It said that child abuse affects the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis and developing brain. Okay, that really is a mouthful. What it means is as we grow as children, our brain is also developing. And the abuse affects the physiology of the brain in such a way that it predisposes to substance use disorder. It's using substances is not just trying to stop pain. Also, one of the things that I found truly amazing is the abuse that changes the brain physiology. It is usually multi-generational. Some people would characterize it as saying, well, my parents were substance use, they had substance use disorder or alcoholic, so, you know, I just got it from them. But there's a reason for that. It affects many different areas of the brain. It affects the subcortical brain regions that underlie stress response. And keep in mind, what this is saying is it doesn't just emotionally change a child how they think, it changes their brain physiology, which increases risk for adolescent substance use. In other words, what is this article is demonstrating is if their parent had substance use disorder or alcoholism, they can transfer that brain physiology to the child that predisposes them to things like this. That was amazing to me. That was truly amazing. So this neurobiological development increases risk for addiction. And the outcomes of this are very, very serious. If a child that has experienced abuse starts using substances, then the early onset of substance use disorders results in more severe illness, addictions, characterized by more severe dependence, more severe withdrawal, a higher incidence of psychotic and mood disorders. And this can involve any substances: alcohol, cannabis, nicotine, opioids, and cocaine. It says childhood neglect, which again is one of the four one of the four child abuse categories we talked about. So neglect is associated with heavy smoking and alcohol use in adolescence. Also, the person that has abuse as a child turns to substance use and abuse initiation at a younger age. Also, an earlier age of first use predicts progression towards heavy use, increased risk of substance use disorders. Alcohol use before age 15 increases risk for disorder by 40%. For each one of those categories experienced, the risk of initiating alcohol and drugs by age 14 is increased by 2 to 3-fold. Child abuse is linked with a faster transition from substance use, in other words, just trying substances, to a substance use disorder. Adolescence is a critical period of development when drug exposure is more likely to lead to dependence. And I'm obviously not going into all the complexity of the brain science, but it's because in early adolescence, the brain is still developing and very plastic, so substances truly affect that development. Early substance use initiation is associated with harsh parenting, parental substance abuse, and poor parental verbal reasoning. But again, when these are heritable conditions with the brain physiology, so technically they're not being bad parents. This is multi-generational. It's probably also what they experienced. A child with physical sexual abuse has a 12-fold increase in the odds that regular use of alcohol and marijuana occurred by the age of 10. Did y'all hear that? Because when I read that, I was like, okay, age of 10. When I interview parents at the hospital that are admitting their child, there's all these questions I have to ask, and if I have like a 9, 10, 11-year-old, and I say, is there a history of substance abuse or drinking? Like my child's 10. Okay, that's what it says. Let me say that again. A 12-fold increase in the odds that regular use of alcohol and marijuana occurred by age 10. I have actually had patients that I have taken care of that their first experience of drug use is smoking marijuana with mom or dad. Okay? 95% of those with substance use disorder, mental health problems, had experienced trauma during childhood. And we just went over that, those 4 categories, okay? So, how do we help a child? So this is, really concerning information that I'm sharing, but also there is an upside to this, that brain plasticity in adolescence is a critical time for intervention due to this rapid brain development. And some of the things that the article said would help a child in this situation or that has experienced this is support from a trusted and available adult during childhood, decrease daily smoking and drinking. Okay, simplistically, a child needs to be loved and supported. This one kind of surprised me. It said also high levels of paternal warmth weaken the association of emotional abuse and alcohol problems. I'm like, paternal? What about the mom? But anyway, supportive relationships teach healthy coping skills to manage stress and build healthy responses to stress. And also, what's needed is improved child care and alleviation of chronic stress can normalize stress hormones. So again, if there's an intervention that takes the child out of the situation, away from the abuse, a supportive person that can step in and help also, that's going to, they think, reverse some of the brain changes that occur. It says some brain changes appear to be reversible when chronic stress is alleviated. And also something that has been talked a lot, mostly in the last few years, is trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. It's also thought to be helpful. Does anybody have any ideas what trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy is? Anybody? Okay, the way I understand trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy is what we're doing right now. And I willingly share that I educated myself preparing for this presentation. And basically what that means is, as a clinician, when you have a patient that comes to you, listen to their trauma, listen to their story, appreciate how their experiences have brought them to you. And also knowing that there are brain changes. That's important for a clinician, is to actually know that there's more than just the surface story to this client, this person. So essentially, that's what I came to present to you. Is there anybody that has any questions?
Well, first I want to thank you because when you asked that long sentence about do you know what that cognitive trauma or whatever, I feel like this has given us a chance to be informed about, or trauma informed, and I wish we had more opportunities to become trauma informed, because there seems to be so much trauma expressing, more than we've seen.
That is an excellent point, because, and this is my impression, as as a clinician and the patients I take care of, I'm not saying that it's supported by numbers, but having done this work for so long, what I do see is when I'm taking histories from the caregivers, there's parents or many times have a history of addiction. And also, too many children are abused. And I'm not just talking about sexually or physically, which those are not good, obviously, but you would be surprised how much abuse is experienced by a child that mom and daddy's on their phone. Go away. The neglect, no food, no routines. It's amazing to me at the hospital that I see a lot of change in children because we have a schedule. We have breakfast at the same time, we have lunch at the same time, we have dinner at the same time, we have bedtime. These are things that children thrive on. And I'm kind of very flexible, not a real scheduled person, but I've seen it. It makes changes.
Addict, and I'm just honored that Reverend Jesse asked me to be a part of the Recovery and Resilience Workshop. I'm going to share a little bit about my story. Actually, Reverend Jesse is a huge part of my story. I came in here, my spirit called me to come. I was at my very rock bottom in October of 2022 after 20 plus years of struggling in active addiction. And I met Reverend Jesse. It was a Sunday, and I came in here a shell of a human being, and just like so just starving for anything spiritual, anything that would give me hope, because I was completely hopeless. And his message that day was like, let God into those dark spaces, and just that like a mustard seed of faith could move mountains. And so I went home that day and I prayed, and I said a prayer just like, God, please just help me. Like, I don't know what to do anymore. And so that prayer gave me just enough hope to get into detox and to get the help I so desperately needed. And just from going from that girl sitting here up almost 3 years ago to here talking about recovery and resilience, it is absolutely a miracle and a testament to the 12 steps of recovery and God working in my life. So thank you, Reverend Jesse, for asking me to be here. So in the 12 steps, I do Drug Addicts Anonymous. We say what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Growing up, I had a wonderful childhood. I had no trauma in my life. I had a very normal suburban life. Some of my family's here today. Gonna make me cry. I had a wonderful mom and dad. My sister was 15 years older than me, and my brother was 13 years older than me, and I was spoiled rotten, I guess. And so yeah, I was very loved. I never had a bad day. I know a lot of addicts say they never really felt like they fit in anywhere. That wasn't my experience early on. I was a straight A student, and I was scared to death to get in trouble. Just for an example, in kindergarten, it was nap time, and I got my name on the board for talking. And I was so distraught, and I cried until the teacher was finally okay, we'll just erase your name. You can go to playtime outside. It's fine. It never happened. So that's how I was all through school. I can remember when my friends started smoking cigarettes, and it was my 7th grade party. And I kicked the guys out for smoking cigarettes. How dare you come to my birthday party and smoke cigarettes? Can't believe you've done this to me. You ruined my party. Fast forward a little bit, my friends start smoking marijuana and drinking, and I'll dabble a little bit. Still, throughout my addiction, I was never a drinker. I would smoke pot, but it never really did anything for me. And then I'm 16, I'm at a party, I'm the designated driver, and I was talking to this cute guy, and he had an Adderall, and I was like, oh, I'm tired, I gotta go to work tomorrow. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, because my older brother would actually let us come to his house and call our parents and be like, hey, we're in for the night, I'm trusting my older brother, but he'd let us go out all night and stay out. So anyway, I got to go to a lot of parties and do a lot of things I shouldn't be doing at 16. But anyway, so he was like, well, take this. I'm like, well, what is it? He's like, it's like an Adderall, it'll just give you energy. And I'm like, okay, sure. So I take this Adderall, and it rocketed into another dimension. I felt this euphoria, and I just couldn't believe I had so much energy. And I looked at my best friend Blair, and I grabbed her by the arm, and I started skipping down the hall, and I said, oh my God, Blair, this is the way I've always wanted to feel. We have to do this again tomorrow. And that was in the year 2001, and I still remember saying that, and I will never forget that feeling. And I realize now, that's not a normal feeling, that's not something normal people would think. I realize now that, people actually need that medication that calms them down, and, but I found that guy the next day, and I took it the next day and the next, and so I went from being, a cheerleader, outstanding citizenship, straight A's. I wanted to be a pediatrician. I had a conscience. I had been raised with these morals and values and these dreams and these goals to nothing mattered but getting that drug, and that was my goal. And it flipped the switch, and I started getting suspended from school. I had 26 absences. I can remember stealing from my grandparents. My papa had a treasure chest, and it meant I didn't even think it was wrong to go in there and take $100 out, and until I got caught, and that I would just never do that. It took over my mind. And then I start seeing a psychiatrist because I'm having anxiety and depression, and I don't go take my final exams. Now I can't go to the University of Alabama because I don't have the grades. And then it becomes like other pills, and so then, I had a really close relationship with my father, and he was so loving and kind and there for me. And then I go off to college. I go to Southern Union, and then he passes away taking a nap, and it just like destroyed my life. My addiction gets even worse. And so after that, a year after that, I have a car wreck, and I get on opiates at that point. So it's just like year after year, my life is just spiraling. Then it becomes IV drug use, and then my family won't talk to me. My mom never gave up on me, but it's like my brothers and sisters, my brother and sister are just they see me just throwing my life away, and they love me, but they, their kids are growing up, and I can't have a relationship with them. I do have a relationship with them, but it's just, my behavior just gets worse and worse. I moved from Oregon to New Orleans. I'm on the street. I'm back home. I'm just missing out on life with family, relationships. So anyway, through all this, I finally go to a rehab for like 9 months in Georgia. And that's where I learned like the 12-step program, and see that I can finally get off of drugs and live sober. And I'll go back to when my dad passed away. I saw that my spirituality, like, I could believe in something. Like, when I was young, I was going to a Baptist church, and that didn't really give me any comfort. And so once my dad passed away and I was so devastated and believed in nothing, I thought, I'm sorry, I'm getting lost. Once my dad passed away, and there's this void and this emptiness, and I'm like, I still feel him, I still see signs from him, and so, I'm so sorry.
It's fine. It's fine.
Okay, so once my dad passed away, oh my God.
Okay.
You found your spiritual.
Yeah. Just blanked.
You can still see him and feel him.
That his love like that transcends time and space, and so I needed to find my own spiritual path. And although I was like still getting high and still on drugs, it made me believe in something again. And so I started reading and diving into what gave me hope and faith, but I felt like a hypocrite. And so it was like I was using drugs, but also had these like philosophical and beautiful spiritual ideas, but I wasn't practicing them. I didn't have like this relationship with God. And so I would like put that away and so I continued to use until I just hit this rock bottom, and that's when in 2022, when I came here, when I was so low, and I was living in Clanton with my mom, and had just reached this spiritual just death in this bottom, and just wanted to die, and just had lost all hope. I came back to Unity. I'd been here before, and that's where I saw Reverend Jesse, and he said, just let God into those dark spots. Like, that's when you're closest to God. And just, wanting to be closest to my dad's spirit, and remembering him and wanting to be the best person for him. So once I did that, and I prayed to God, and I just kind of fell to my knees, like, okay, God, what do I got to do? Because I can't live like this anymore. And so that's where I went to detox, and got back in the program, and I went to IOP and kind of joined my spirituality with the 12 steps, and was able through the 12 steps to have a relationship with God and join my spirituality with being of service to other people and being a sponsor. And, I come to Unity, and it's a lot of action and a lot of prayer, and that's how I'm able to stay sober and just be at peace and content. So that's all I got.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Elizabeth, and I want to say thank you to Reverend Jesse for inviting me to be here for this recovery and resilience workshop. And also a big thank you to Susan and Rachel. I loved hearing from both of y'all. The first thing I want to say is that I feel, honored to speak with a group of people who are aligned with their faith, but also willing to have these conversations about some of the darker parts of humanity. In my experience, I grew up in a church in a small town in Alabama. We did not talk about things like this. The only thing that I really ever heard was, like sometimes I would hear like the grown-ups gossiping about it, but not ever really like saying anything other than that. And we were just kind of told to, pray about it and it would go away. And so that was my experience until I got older, got sober. So before we get started, I do want to tell you all a little bit about me. So I'm an Alabama native. I'm from Athens, Alabama. It's in North Alabama. My wife and I moved here in 2018. I am a person in long-term recovery. I got sober on May the 14th of 2016. So I celebrated 9 years last month. Like Rachel, I've been to treatment a few times. I have been arrested as a result of my drug use, and I have done some pretty questionable things with drugs and alcohol. And I'll tell you a little bit about why this is important to me. So it's directly affected me, but it's also directly affected my loved ones. Both of my paternal grandparents were alcoholics. Same with me, addict, alcoholic, and it's kind of sprinkled throughout my family tree. Mental health issues, substance use issues, things like that. And my addiction sort of really started after my granddad died by suicide in 2012. He had been in and out of treatment programs for several years, struggled with depression and alcoholism. And so after that, mine sort of took off. But I am really grateful to be standing here in front of you talking about this on the other side of things when I quite literally thought that I would never make it out of the hole that I was in. So Rachel, I relate to you a lot on that. And I also had a mom that never gave up on me, so I like hearing that from you. So first I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do and where I work, and then we'll get into some of the harm reduction things. So I work for Recovery Resource Center. We are a program of the Crisis Center. We are housed in the Cooper Green building. It's on UAB's campus. We are on the 4th floor in Suite 4500, and we are open Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4. You can come into our office for services, or there's telehealth services because we do service the entire state of Alabama. If you want to go on to the next slide. So a little bit about our primary services. So first is information. Sometimes when people have never done this before or have no clue how to get sober or anything like that, we'll have parents Google us, or they're calling us after an internet search, or a person who's directly affected. And we can provide them information about the services that we offer, or if we can't help them with the services that we offer, we will direct them to an agency that can. We partner with a lot of agencies in the state of Alabama whose primary purpose is to help people with substance use disorder. So we're kind of the first stop for people who are trying to get sober for the first time. Peer support is what I do. I'm a certified recovery support specialist. I work with 7 or 8 other peers in our office. And so the first thing that happens when a client comes into our office is that they are connected with a peer, which is a person who's in long-term recovery. I think the requirement to work for us is 3 years, but everybody that I work with has over 5. And so we meet with them, they come into our space, and they tell us about what they have going on, what their situation is, what they've been using. We talk about trauma, we talk about mental health issues, we talk about all of the factors that have contributed to winding up in our office. After we gather that information, establish a rapport with them. So in certain circumstances, I'll share part of my experience if I feel like it's appropriate to kind of help them not feel so uncomfortable or alone in what they're telling me. And so after we do the peer support, we will connect them with one of our clinicians who has a master's in social work, and they do state assessments for the clients. If you are uninsured in the state of Alabama and you need to go to rehab, typically the place that you'll end up going is a state-funded facility. In order to get into the state-funded facility, it requires a state assessment. We are one of the only places in Alabama that does those for free. So we have a lot of people coming all the time. Other places charge for it. So one of the things that I love about us is there's no cost for our services. And then after the assessment is done, they will get their referrals. So the referrals are given based off the substances that they've been using. So if they've been using alcohol, opiates, or benzos, it'll be detox. It also depends on their history of substance use, the history of treatment attempts, things like that. And so they'll get those referrals, which are the names and numbers of the treatment centers that they've been referred to, and then they will be in charge of calling those places to secure a bed. Also, I want to leap in there, after they leave our office, we don't stop talking to them. So as a peer support specialist, I call them up to 2 or 3 times a week to check in with them, see how things are going, and if they have any issues arise, they can call me or one of the other peers. And I think that's super important because there's a very small window of time for people who are ready to go to treatment to get into treatment, because in my experience, even with me, I was very quick to change my mind. I wanted to go to rehab 1 minute, and then the next day when I had money and drugs, I didn't want to go. So it's very important that we stay connected with them after they leave our office. And then for community outreach, we do a lot. So we're in churches, we're in hospitals, UAB, St. Vincent's UAB, Grandview, Princeton. We have people that work in our organization in those hospitals to meet with people who have recently had an overdose or have substance-related issues that are interested in treatment. And we also have one of our peers who goes out with One Roof. It's an unhoused organization, and they go into the homeless camps to provide Narcan, harm reduction resources, and get them connected with us if they're interested in treatment. And then harm reduction materials, we're going to get into that a little later in more depth, but that would be things like Narcan and fentanyl test strips. So you can go to the next slide. Sorry, I need to get some water. All right, so last year, so we have a spreadsheet that we keep up with to see how many clients that we've seen. Last year we saw 4,038 clients, which is a total of 336 a month, and we distributed 2,306 doses of Narcan. we are busy all the time. Last year I had myself 558 clients, which is an average of about 45 a month. So people are constantly coming into our office for services. And so yeah, that's that one. Okay, this is a slide I like to focus on. So when clients come in and they do that, what they meet with the peer, and we're establishing rapport and we're getting information from them, this is where this data is collected. And so 63.9% of the clients that we worked with last year reported some form of trauma. That's physical, sexual, emotional, things like that. And I think that that is probably underreported because sometimes people come in and they still don't feel safe to share what's happened with them, and that may come out later, but this is just what's reported. And then 36.9% have had a prior overdose. There is a lot of IV fentanyl use happening right now, like a lot of it. And many of the clients that I see who have used IV fentanyl have had an overdose before or have had close to an overdose or something that, I'll tell you about a client that I just had. She is in an ICU at a hospital, and she overdosed. She thought she was using crack cocaine, but there was fentanyl in the crack cocaine. Fentanyl is in just about everything now. And so you think you might be using one thing, but you're using something else with it, which is the really scary part about this whole fentanyl epidemic, because it's in almost everything. And then prior suicide attempts, 29.4%. I think that's a little bit lower than what it actually is. And I have clients that come in that say they've never had an attempt, but many of my clients say that they've had thoughts of suicide and plans, but never attempted. And then this one, 32.7% of the clients we saw last year were unhoused at the time of the intake. They were sleeping on the streets of Birmingham. And so this makes it really hard for, especially for unhoused clients, to get sober, because we can get them into these treatment centers, but if they don't have the right housing resources, then they just go to treatment and then they go back onto the streets. And the cycle sort of repeats itself until we can get them connected with people that can get them housed, which doesn't happen quickly a lot of times. So it's kind of a perpetual cycle. And then the average treatment wait time is 10 days. These state-funded facilities are pretty busy all the time. And so that's why it's so important when they leave our office that we are staying in communication with them to try to keep them engaged until they can get into treatment. And it is on them to call these facilities, but if they ever have any issues like getting connected with them, they will call me or whoever their peer is, and we will get them connected that way. And then you can go on to the next one. All right, so barriers to recovery, lack of health insurance is the first one. Many of the clients that we see don't have insurance. Some of them have like Medicaid or a United Healthcare Marketplace policy, and that only covers detox. It doesn't cover any long-term care. And then limited income, most of the clients that we see report receiving no income because they can't keep a job because of their substance use disorder. And if they do have income like SSI or SSDI, it's very limited funds. So most people that we encounter have no insurance and no money. Being unhoused is a big one. Like I said, it's kind of a perpetual cycle that is hard to get out of. If you want to get sober, you go to treatment, and then you're kind of just back on the streets after. Lack of transportation is also a big one. Sorry, I need to grab some water. Lots of our clients who come into our office have been staying at like Salvation Army or firehouse shelters, places like that. Sometimes the case managers there will bring them to our office. Other people, I said we service the entire state of Alabama, so people will be calling for Mobile County or whatever county, and they can't come into our office for services. And if we offer over-the-phone services, but it takes a little longer to get connected with treatment versus if you just came into our office. So lack of transportation is a big barrier. Limited access to a phone. I have clients come in all the time that do not have a cell phone. And so one of the important parts that, like after their assessment, they're supposed to be able to call these facilities. They don't have access to a phone, so it makes it much harder for them to connect with treatment. And then these last two go together: limited support from family or friends, or living or staying with others who are using substances. A lot of the clients that we see will say that they don't have like a safe home environment to return to because mom and dad are using, or other people in the house are using, and so it's really kind of harder for them because they know that if they go to treatment and then try to go back home, it's not going to be a safe environment to not use. And then stigma associated with it is a huge one. People don't talk about it enough. We don't have these hard conversations. And that's why I've been so excited and grateful that y'all were willing to hear this today, because in my experience, people in churches haven't been open to talking about this kind of stuff. You can go to the next one. All right. Types of opioids. There is fentanyl and heroin, and then there is oxycodone, hydrocodone, hydromorphone, morphine, and codeine. Similar to what Rachel talked about, she had a car wreck, they put her on opiates. And sometimes that's how that starts. It's a back surgery, it's a car accident, it's some medical condition that requires you to have pain medication, and then at some point you can become physically dependent, and that physical dependency may turn into psychological dependency. And at that time, that's how it started for me. I was using oxycodone, and then when that got too expensive, I switched to heroin because it was cheaper. And so people will start with, pain pills, and then we'll move into fentanyl and heroin when it gets too expensive. You can go to the next slide. And then let's talk about the pills on the left first. So there is counterfeit pills and there are real pills. One of the scary things about this is that you can buy a pill press on Amazon and you can buy a pill mold for like $15 or $30 or something to create these counterfeit pills. If you'll notice on the left, the real pills are actually a little more grainy than the pills who have been pressed. Like on the left, on the top, it's a little bit more grainy. On the right, the counterfeit pill, it's a little bit more pronounced. What I will say about this though is that, like, as long as you are getting your medication from a pharmacist, it's safely regulated. But if you run out of medication and get it from family, friend, or someone off the streets, you run the risk of getting a counterfeit pill, which is more than likely fentanyl. Using alone is a big issue, especially if you're using fentanyl, heroin, things like that. And if you're using IV, the medication hits your system much quicker than it would if you took it orally or any other way to use it. And so, if you're using, it's safe to use, or it's normally better to use around someone else in the event of an overdose, because somebody can call and say, hey, I've got somebody overdosed here. And there is a Good Samaritan law in Alabama, so there's no civil liability if you also are using drugs and call to say somebody has overdosed. So they won't arrest you or anything like that. Using again after a period of abstinence. Before I got sober the first time, I was using a very high amount of the drugs that I was using, and when I returned to use, like a few months later, I did not use the same amount that I did, but I'm trying to think how to explain this, but if you're using 120 milligrams of oxycodone and then you get sober, you can't start off with 120 milligrams of oxycodone again, because there's a high risk of overdose. There was a guy in the recovery community recently who was having some really tough life issues going on. He had been sober for an extended period of time. He went out and used fentanyl one time and it killed him. And that's what is super scary about some of this. And then what else have I not covered? Mixing substances like depressants, like alcohol and opiates, that's not good. It slows your respiratory system down. Same thing if you do like a stimulant and alcohol, that runs the risk of like cardiac issues, things like that. So, all of those are important. Not to use alone, don't mix substances, don't use the same amount of drugs when you return to use as you did when the last time you used. And then you go on to the next slide. Signs of an overdose: respiratory depression, cannot be woken up, unresponsive to a sternal rub, and so that's where you've got your knuckles in between the breastbone of somebody trying to wake them up. It can be really painful if you're doing it correctly. Snoring or gurgling, and it's also like known as the death rattle. It's very alarming when you hear it. Blue or gray skin, dark lips and fingernails, and drug paraphernalia present. I will tell you a quick story. I've got like 3 minutes. I need to wrap it up. In 2019, I was driving home from work at Bradford, and there was a car stopped at a four-way stop that people were going around. And so I get out of the car and realize that the gentleman in the vehicle, his foot is on the brake, but there's a needle on his leg, and his head is kind of all the way back like this, and he has the death rattle, he has respiratory depression, he has all the signs and symptoms that are listed there. A gentleman that was outside with me was able to put a brick through the passenger window of his car, and we were able to assist him until EMS got there. But those are all the signs and symptoms of overdose. I mean, it would be very apparent to you that you were coming up on an overdose if you saw all of those things. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Okay, this is an important thing. I brought Narcan here today. I have 36 boxes with me if anybody would like any. This is used when there's an opiate, fentanyl, heroin, any kind of overdose like that. If you see someone who has the symptoms of what we talked about in the last slide, this is where you would want to use Narcan. So you call 911 and administer the nasal spray into their nostril. There's 2 doses in each box. It's just like Flonase. You just put it in their nose, press it, and that's how it works. You wait 1 to 2 minutes, and if they're still breathing less than 8 breaths per minute, you can give the second dose. And you can continue to do this until EMS arrives. One of the important things about this is, and one of the things I thought about when I first learned about Narcan was, well, what if I get to somebody who's not had an overdose? Like maybe it's like another medical emergency or something diabetic related, something like that. This will not hurt them. You can give whoever it is Narcan and it will not have any adverse effects on them. This will only reverse an overdose. I think that's all I have on that one. And if anybody would like to talk to me after or wants to learn how to use Narcan, I have it sitting right back here in that bag. Or if anybody wants any, please feel free to get some from me. And then I think this is the last slide, decline in overdose deaths in 2024. So you can see in 2020 where it kind of got really alarming after COVID. It just kind of continued to go higher and higher and higher. And then in 2023, there was a law signed where we were able to receive the Narcan through the health department. You don't have to pay for it. We have Narcan in our office. We have it at the Jefferson County Health Department. And the fatal overdoses was down 18.4% last year, and that's largely due to the fact that we were able to distribute Narcan. And one thing I like to say about like Narcan too is, some people have mixed reviews on Narcan, and they think it's maybe a cop out or whatever. But my thing is like you're never going to have a chance to get sober if you're dead, and that's why we use Narcan, because we believe that everybody deserves a chance to get sober. I think that's all I have. It was great talking to y'all. If y'all have any questions, it's already 1 o'clock. You can see me after, but it's been great to talk to y'all today. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's put our hands together for all of our speakers one more time. Elizabeth, Susan, Rachel, you all are awesome. Again, this is the work, the overall harm reduction, wraparound services. This is what we're here for as a spiritual community. And as a faith leader, one of the things that we learned over the last couple of weeks in our cohort is regardless of your position, we're all here to do this work of reducing harm, reducing stigma, and helping to support the people in our communities. And for some of us, it's the people in our home. And thank God that nobody gave up on us. And that's both the challenge and that's where the work is, to never give up, because the spark of divinity is alive in all of us. And so, again, thank you all for your participation. if you will, take a few moments. The survey is going around. Don't put your name on it. It's an anonymous survey. This is just more data for the Clinton Foundation so that we can continue to do this work, not just in the city of Birmingham, but around the world. They use that in order to speak to their shareholders to secure funding so that they can continue to have boots on the ground and train faith leaders and get Narcan on the ground for those that do need it. And then once you have completed those, if you will, pass them over to Mr. Bruce who's walking around. And then, I know you all probably have plans to leave, but we have wonderful catering services provided by Ms. Charlene Parker downstairs. The menu is a choice between vegetarian or traditional lasagna. She has a dessert, drinks, so feel free to join us in the lobby, or join us downstairs, in Beverly Hall. Thank you all again. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you.